Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Oh, this current age that we live in is not particularly unique. We've had previous ages of skullduggery, oligarchy, and other tricks. Stacy?
Right. Well, people have been pointing out that we're in the age of the robber baron, and that really started right around the last global financial crisis. And of course, in the data, you can show and you could see that the wealth and income gap has been exploding. And certainly over the past year and a half, we've seen robber baron sort of fortunes, the Vanderbilt sort of fortunes, and the big Mellon families and stuff like that. Well, the most famous robber baron of them all, and he was the most famous because he was just openly vile, gives a good quote, I think, that helps understand a lot of the current domestic partisanship, hyper-partisanship, something that many people have noted in the media about this hyper-partisanship that we see. Jay Gould said, "I can hire one half of the working class to kill the other half." Just to put him into context, he was born in 1836 and died in 1892. He was a railroad baron. He started out with Erie Railroad, worked, basically corrupted and paid off Boss Tweed of Tammany Hall, a New York corrupt legislator, and advanced his fortune, and then ended up buying a controlling interest in Union Pacific, still around to this day. And we're going to get into some of his gold market schemes as well. But he was a fabulously wealthy guy who basically paid off politicians to advance his cause even more, his wealth even more.
Oh, yeah, Jay Gould. Well, railways at that time was the cutting edge technology, and it was the globalization, all the rhetoric we hear talking about the networks and the global networks and the high tech tyrants out there. I mean, it's borrowed from the earlier era when railway was considered to be, the end all and the be all. And so this guy was kind of the Bill Gates of his day, I guess.
Well, I mean, it was just shocking, like the level of amount of corruption he did. And a lot of it was targeted at like his rivals, like Carnegie. He defrauded him essentially and got part of his controlling interest in one of the railways. And he just used outright, well, it looks like a lot of what you see in the global financial markets, especially since 2008, but these big banks get fined. They pay a small fine and then they move on. Or any of the other skullduggery you've seen at the big multinational corporations. And I'll highlight one of the things he did, which again, look back at any of the past 10 years of Keiser Report, and doesn't this sound a lot like what we've already seen in the global financial crisis? In August of 1869, Gould and his partner Fisk began to buy gold in an attempt to corner the market, hoping that the increase in the price of gold would increase the price of wheat and motivate Western farmers to sell. This in turn would cause a great amount of shipping eastward, increasing freight business for the Erie Railroad. During this time, Gould also used contacts with President Ulysses S. Grant's brother-in-law, Abel Corbin, to influence the president and his Secretary General Horace Porter. These speculations culminated in the Panic of Black Friday on September 24th, 1869, when the greenback cash premium over face value fell in gold. A double eagle fell from 62% to 35%. So using political connections, using illegal methods, to profit. He did profit off this, but then ended up having to pay a lot of the profit back in lawsuits that were filed. But again, those take time and effort to file lawsuits and get to the bottom of all those like collateralized debt obligations that crashed the market in 2008, and then they pay back a small fraction of their ill-gotten gains.
What's fascinating is that to spur a commodities panic buying spree, he tried to corner gold. Now, in the 21st century, we have a panic buying spree in commodities. Commodities have hit a new all-time high, higher than in 2011, higher than in any time in history. And yet, what's lagging horribly? Gold and silver. This commodities boom is being spurred really by oil. Oil is really the new gold. It's the global currency. It's the petrodollar. It's been with us since 1971 when the U.S. switched from gold to oil to back its currency. And so Jay Gould, if he were alive today, he would be cornering the oil market to try to spur a commodities panic buying to get offload his wheat.
Right. And remember, so the quote from him that I want to put into context of this new robber baron era, and definitely, especially since 2016, but it was already happening before then, the hyper partisanship, the deep, deep abiding hatred between teams of red versus teams of blue and the other way around. Remember, he said, I can hire one half of the working class to kill the other half. So he wasn't worried about finding workers for his railroads because he said he could find half to kill the other half. That's why they couldn't go on strike and demand more money from him, blah, blah, blah. So a headline out this past week, I think this is from The Hill, shocking poll finds many Americans now want to secede from the United States. Overall, 37% of respondents indicated a willingness to secede. So this is the hatred, that half hating the other half. This is, however, not just one oligarch who was openly saying it, a robber baron. Let's call them robber barons in our country. So we have the collective class of robber barons now have basically, I believe, divided the country in such a way through their corporate media, especially pushing each other to hate each other over seemingly frivolous things.
Yeah, well, the first reading of the headline is kind of confusing. It sounds like Americans want to secede from themselves, which there's a lot of self-hating Americans out there that just would prefer not to be American. I can understand that. But I guess what it means is that there are two disparate groups, the right and the left, the blue and the red, and they're at odds with each other. And like in Jay Gould's time, it's all a puppet show being orchestrated at the top by the oligarchs to try to keep people from getting a living wage while they jack up the price of food and energy without any opposition. And as you point out, if they do get any opposition, it'll be a fine that'll be taken out of the profits, and it'll take years and years. This has been Jamie Dimon's modus operandi for years. They get the ability over there at JP Morgan, the bank that he runs, they keep 90 cents of every dollar they steal. They know that they have to pay 10 cents of every dollar they steal as a fine, and that's the cost of doing business, and Jamie's happy to do that. He became a billionaire with this model. He's the Jay Gould of 2021.
Well, he certainly is what one could call a robber baron, a modern-day robber baron 2.0. And I wanted to then cut to this next headline about proving essentially that we are in a robber baron 2.0. Jay Gould, when he died in 1895, died with the equivalent, adjusted for some inflation, of about $2.5 billion. So that was considered pretty wealthy back then. Now that's, not that much.
You don't get on the Forbes 400 list last year, and it needed at least 11 billion, I believe.
Right. So he wouldn't have been on there. Nevertheless, this is from wolfstreet.com, who does an excellent, series. He's always looking at rent prices, house prices, bubble markets, and he also does that wealth effect monitor. So he's looking at the data that the Fed releases every quarter showing the wealth disparity, which subtracts from this trillionaires and the very, very multi-billionaires. So the numbers here won't be showing the likes of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. But my wealth effect monitor for the money printer economy, holy moly, October update. So here on the set, this is my printer ran out of color printer, but I will show you on screen here the per household wealth effective Fed policies. The top 1%, again, not shown separately, the truly rich, the billionaire class. So as you see, they've run away after this 1999 to 2002 period where there was a sort of leveling out. They didn't get any wealthier. We saw 9/11 happen then. We saw China introduced to the WTO, and we saw the dot-com crash. The dot-com crash was the beginning of the hyper money printing, the intervention from the Fed, and the rescuing of the robber baron class. So since then, you've seen up to the 2008 financial crisis, a little bit of a dip, and then it's gone straight up since then, especially parabolic in the last year. But in terms of that, getting 50% to hate the other 50%, the most important one really is that 2 to 9%. That's the top 1%. This is the top 2 to 9%. They're the ones that are in the media. Those are the ones on television every night telling the other 50% to hate each other, to hate the guy down the street who makes $50,000 a year, not the guy making $50 billion a year. So I think they're the important ones on there. And this is from the Fed data in terms of how the wealth and income gap continues to explode under Biden, just as it was under Trump.
Right. We've been doing this show for 13 years. And going back 13 years or so, we were covering what we were talking about at that time, the Gini coefficient ratio. And this was the study of third world countries and how the wealth was concentrated at the very top at the oligarchs and the dictators and the potentates, and how the people were suffering. Well, here we are 13 years later after 9/11, of course, very important event in America's history in terms of the wealth, income, and wealth disparity. We're talking about the wealth and income gap, but this is the Gini coefficient. It's what it is. It shows you that America's become a third world country. Nobody can argue that point with me. I'm happy to go on any American mainstream television, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, BBC, you name it, and I will stand by my position that America is now officially a third world country, full stop. I'll never get that call because I'm Max Keiser, and they would never have me on because they would immediately descend into a puddle of tears, hide under their desk crying like little babies. But nevertheless, it's true. America is now a third world country, full stop.
So regarding this chart, Wolf Street mentions that, the Fed printed $4.5 trillion since the pandemic began. And this, as you could see, went entirely into the hands of the top 1%, almost entirely. There's a little tiny blip in the 2 to 9% group. They seem to be happy with it. If you tune into cable news, they're on the cable news and they're telling people, shut up and be happy. Well, he says this was the greatest economic injustice committed in recent U.S. history. Congress could shut it down, but doesn't want to even debate it. Members of Congress mostly belong to the top 10%, or hope to soon belong to it, on their congressional salaries, of course, ha, ha, ha. And that's why this continues. The bottom 50% don't understand what the Fed is doing to them, don't even know what the Fed is and does, and they are too busy trying to survive in this economy that the Fed has so powerfully rigged against them. The Fed is the modern Tammany Hall. So look up Tammany Hall, look up Boss Tweed, J-Pal, Boss Tweed, same thing. We see it in the data. Okay.
Yeah, central bankers try to get inside information. Nancy Pelosi, the Mubarak